The final demand. The vast expanse of space stretched endlessly beyond the massive diplomatic chamber on Orion Prime, the neutral ground chosen for humanity's latest, and perhaps last, negotiation with the Zenvari Dominion and its allied species. The chamber's towering windows displayed the distant glow of a dying star, its crimson light flickering against the polished obsidian floor. Seated at the far end of a long curved table was Admiral Elias Voss, the supreme commander of Earth's defense forces, his sharp blue eyes scanning the alien delegation before him. His uniform, a deep navy adorned with silver accents, bore the scars of battles long fought and wars narrowly avoided. Across from him sat the Zenvari High Arbiter, a towering figure with bioluminescent skin that shimmered between shades of violet and deep indigo, his gaze unreadable. Flanking him were the representatives of the Kelleri Trade Union, the Rissin clans, and the Vor-Kel theocracy, all powerful species who had for decades dictated the terms of galactic diplomacy. The High Arbiter leaned forward, his elongated fingers tapping against the table in a slow, deliberate rhythm. When he spoke, his voice was smooth, almost hypnotic, but beneath its calculated calmness, there was the unmistakable undertone of arrogance. "Humanity must understand," he said, his words carried through the translator implant embedded in every delegate's ear, "that uncontrolled expansion cannot continue. The Dominion has been more than patient. We have tolerated your kind claiming systems that were never yours, building fleets that threaten stability, and refusing to recognize the authority of the greater galactic order." Voss didn't flinch. He had heard this before, countless times. 50 years of these negotiations. 50 years of being treated like an unruly child that needed to be disciplined. 50 years of giving in, compromising, sacrificing, only to be asked for more. He kept his voice steady. The outer colonies belonged to Earth. They were settled by human hands, built with human labor, and defended with human lives. We will not abandon them. The Vor-Kel delegate, a creature with a hide of chitinous armor and burning amber eyes, let out a guttural sound, the equivalent of a mocking laugh. "Foolish. Your people have been permitted to exist. That privilege can be revoked." A murmur of agreement rippled through the alien ranks. Voss let the silence hang for a moment before speaking again, his words cutting through the tension like a blade. "What you fail to understand," he said, slowly rising from his seat, "is that humanity has never relied on permission to survive." The air in the chamber shifted. The Kellerian Voy, a serpentine being with holographic neural tendrils, tilted its head. "Are you implying that Earth intends to reject the Dominion's offer?" "That would be most unwise." Voss exhaled slowly. He was tired of pretending, tired of waiting, tired of kneeling. He had received the confirmation minutes ago. The time for diplomacy had ended. He tapped his neural interface discreetly. The silent command was sent. Operation Phantom Veil was now in motion. Turning back to the assembled alien leaders, he squared his shoulders. "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating it outright. Humanity will no longer negotiate from a position of submission. We are reclaiming our sovereignty." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across the High Arbiter's face. "This is reckless," the alien leader said, his voice sharper now, no longer the calm and controlled facade of diplomacy. "You are not strong enough to stand against the Dominion. You have no allies, no fleet that can rival ours. Humanity will be destroyed." Voss finished for him, his lips curling into a knowing smirk. He turned, walking away from the table, his boots striking the polished floor with quiet authority. "That's what you always assumed, isn't it? That humanity has spent the last 50 years cowering, afraid of your might." The other delegates shifted in their seats as Voss reached the chamber doors. "Tell me," he continued, pausing just long enough to glance over his shoulder, "did it never occur to you that we might have been preparing all this time? That we let you believe we were weak? That we wanted you to think Earth was vulnerable?" The tension exploded. The Zenvari Arbiter stood abruptly, his voice now a hiss of anger. You are playing a dangerous game, Admiral Voss. If Earth refuses to comply, there will be consequences. Economic collapse, embargoes, isolation. If that does not bring you to heel, then the Dominion will have no choice but to crush you completely. Voss let out a slow breath and shook his head. You still don't get it, he said, amusement creeping into his voice. You think you're in control. The doors slid open, revealing a corridor lined with Earth's diplomatic officers, military personnel, and security forces. He turned fully to face them one last time. We are done bowing to tyrants. His voice was calm, resolute, and filled with certainty. The neural command finalized in his interface. Across the Sol system, humanity's mask began to drop. On the surface of Mars, hidden bunkers unsealed, revealing fleets of warships built in secret, shielded from prying eyes for decades. On Titan, vast manufacturing complexes, once assumed to be mining stations, now activated weapons arrays never seen before. And in the dark reaches of space, Earth's first stealth armada disengaged its cloaking systems, revealing itself to the galaxy for the first time. For 50 years, humanity had been preparing. The game had never been about diplomacy. It had always been about time. And now, the time for words was over. Voss stepped into the corridor, the doors hissing shut behind him. The last thing the alien delegation heard before the signal cut was his final message. You wanted to control us. Now you'll see what happens when humanity stops holding back. And with that, the war for Earth's future began. Humanity's mask comes off. A deep, unnatural silence filled the grand diplomatic chamber on Orion Prime. The alien delegates remained frozen in place, their thoughts struggling to process what had just transpired. Admiral Elias Voss had walked away, not just from the negotiations, but from the illusion of peace that had held humanity in chains for half a century. The Zenvari High Arbiter clenched his elongated fingers, his iridescent skin shifting from deep violet to a throbbing crimson, a sign of barely suppressed rage. They were hiding their strength. For decades, his voice, usually calm and composed, now carried an unmistakable tremor of disbelief. The Vorkal warlord slammed his clawed fist against the table, his amber eyes burning with fury. Impossible. We had surveillance on their entire system. We monitored their production rates. We, the Killarian Voy, whose kind thrived on information networks, interrupted in a voice full of nervous static. Our intelligence suggests an elaborate deception, fabricated trade routes, manipulated output logs, cloaked facilities. The holographic tendrils extending from its skull flickered in chaotic patterns, a sign of severe data conflict. Earth's technology was assumed to be a decade behind our lowest-tier military units. A pause. A realization. It was never true. The Zenvari High Arbiter turned sharply toward his second-in-command, his words slicing through the air like a plasma bolt. Deploy the first fleet to the Sol system, immediately. But even as the order left his lips, a new transmission interrupted the meeting. A human broadcast. A signal that shouldn't have been able to breach Orion Prime's secured diplomatic frequencies. Yet, it had. Sol System. Lunar Defense Command. From Earth's moon, deep beneath the surface of Tycho Crater, Admiral Voss stood in the central war chamber, his hands resting behind his back as he surveyed the holomap. The long-hidden command center, a fortress buried under kilometers of reinforced titanium alloy, had been secretly built over decades. And now, for the first time in history, it was fully operational. The air was charged with tension and purpose. Officers moved with trained efficiency, their voices crisp as they relayed status reports across the chamber. A deep hum resonated through the floor as Earth's planetary defense grid powered up, revealing itself to the galaxy. Stealth warships uncloaked. Orbital fortresses activated. Weapon platforms hidden beneath the ice of Europa awakened. All across the Sol system, Earth's forces were breaking free of their disguises. A junior officer approached Voss, his voice steady but carrying the weight of the moment. "Admiral, The signal has been broadcasted across all Dominion frequencies. Orion Prime received it first. Voss allowed himself the smallest hint of a smirk. Good. The message was simple. Humanity was done kneeling. A new future had begun. And if the Dominion thought they could crush Earth under the weight of their fleets, they were about to learn the truth the hard way. Zenvari Dominion High Command. Fleet Assembly Nexus. Ithar Prime. A cold silence filled the war room of the Dominion's military headquarters, where the High Council of Strategy had assembled in emergency session. Projected across the chamber was the live feed from the Sol system, a horrifying revelation for those who had believed humanity was weak. The once primitive humans had somehow built an entire shadow empire of war right under their noses. The Zenvari Grand Strategist, a being known for his decades of cold, calculated war doctrine, stared at the images in stunned disbelief. This cannot be real. The Kellari Minister of Intelligence slithered forward, his bioluminescent tendrils shifting in nervous patterns. It is all real. The Rissan Warlord, his massive tusks gleaming under the war room's dim lighting, let out a low, rumbling growl. Then it is war. Another silence. This one different. A silence of fear. Because despite their massive fleets, despite their technological dominance, despite their centuries of galactic control, they all realized the same horrifying truth. They didn't know what else humanity had been hiding. And that single thought chilled them to their cores. Earth's first move. The silent strike. At the edges of the Sol system, Dominion scout ships patrolled the dark void, their sensors scanning for any sign of weakness in Earth's defenses. They found nothing. Or so they thought. Aboard the Zenvari recon vessel, Kethesh, the commanding officer felt it before he saw it. A sudden shift in gravity readings, a distortion in the void itself. A whisper of movement. Then, impact. The Kethesh never had a chance. A sleek, black shape materialized out of nowhere. A ship that didn't register on their scanners until it was already upon them. By the time the Zenvari crew tried to react, it was too late. A brilliant flash of white-hot energy erupted through the bridge, cutting through the hull like paper. The last thing the Zenvari officers saw before the void swallowed him was the insignia on the attacking ship's hull, the mark of humanity's first true stealth fleet. And in that moment, he understood. They were no longer the hunters. They were the hunted. Admiral Voss' last warning. Back on Lunar Defense Command, the countdown for Phase 2 had begun. Humanity's first strike was already in motion, and the Dominion's outer supply lines were about to be severed. The war had begun not with a desperate defense, but with a calculated counteroffensive. Voss took a deep breath as he addressed the officers in the war chamber. For 50 years, they underestimated us. His voice was calm, but every word was razor-sharp. They demanded our submission, treated us like an inconvenience. He turned toward the massive holo display, where real-time footage showed human warships tearing through enemy supply chains. He faced his officers, his soldiers, his people. No more. He gestured, and a transmission was sent, his final warning to the Dominion. The time for negotiation is over. You wanted war. You have it. The message was sent. And across the galaxy, the Zenvari Dominion realized what they had unleashed. Humanity was no longer holding back. The first strike. The war had begun, not with a desperate defense, but with a calculated counteroffensive. For 50 years, the Zenvari Dominion and its allies had believed humanity was weak, that Earth's military was nothing more than an inconvenience to be controlled. But now, across the Sol system, their worst fears were being realized. The mask had come off, and humanity had no intention of fighting on the defensive. Zenvari Dominion Border Region. Outpost Vexus 9. The first strike came in the dead of space. Outpost Vexus 9 was one of the Dominion's most fortified supply hubs, a massive orbital station floating in the darkness between two barren moons. It served as a fuel depot and staging ground for Dominion fleets moving toward Earth's colonies. For decades, the Zenvari had been complacent, believing their naval superiority absolute. That belief died in an instant. The Black Fleet rises. No warning, no alarms, only a sudden, inexplicable flicker in space itself. And then shadows came to life. Earth's first stealth armada, known only as Black Fleet Zero, decloaked all at once, emerging like predators from the void. Zenvari officers aboard Vexus 9 barely had time to react before their entire defense grid collapsed in a storm of coordinated strikes. Human shock troopers, outfitted in the latest Voidborn armor, equipped with adaptive camouflage fields, boarded the station in seconds. One by one, the outpost's systems were hijacked, its personnel neutralized. And within 30 minutes, the once mighty Dominion stronghold was under human control. The message was clear. As the Zenvari High Command scrambled to respond, their comm channels were hijacked by a single human transmission, broadcasted from Vexus 9 itself. A message from Admiral Elias Voss. His voice was calm, his words deliberate. This outpost is now under Earth's control. Consider this your only warning. Stand down, or we will take the next one. And the next, and the next. He leaned forward, his gaze cold and unwavering. This isn't the war you thought it would be. The transmission cut off. And across the Zenvari Dominion, for the first time in centuries, the powerful Galactic Empire felt something they had never associated with humans before. Fear. The Dominion strikes back. The Zenvari High Arbiter sat in his war chamber, his indigo-hued skin pulsing with anger. This is an insult, he hissed, his luminous eyes narrowing as he turned to his commanders. Deploy the 7th Armada. If the humans want war, we will erase them from history. The warlords of the Rissan clans and the Vor-Kol theocracy voiced their agreement. The 7th Armada, one of the most advanced fleets in the known galaxy, was mobilized at once. 50 warships, thousands of fighters, enough firepower to reduce an entire world to ash. And their destination, Earth. The trap was already set. The Dominion believed this would be a swift and brutal counterattack, one that would crush humanity before it could gain momentum. What they didn't know, what they had never even considered, was that Earth had been waiting for this exact moment. For years, humanity's greatest minds had studied the Dominion's fleet formations, their battle tactics, their strategic weaknesses. For years, secret weapons platforms had been hidden within the asteroid belt, disguised as mining operations. For years, Earth's scientists had perfected disruptive warfare technologies, things that the Dominion had no counter for. And now, as the 7th Armada sped toward Earth, Admiral Voss gave a simple command. Activate Project Revenant. The war had officially entered its next phase. The Battle of the Asteroid Belt. The 7th Armada reached the edge of the Sol system, its warships bristling with weapons, prepared to obliterate anything in their path. But as soon as they entered the asteroid belt, something went terribly wrong. The first explosion came out of nowhere. Then another. Then 100 more. The Dominion fleet staggered as hidden orbital mines detonated, their shields overloaded by the sheer force of the blasts. And before they could even regroup, the humans struck. Out of the shadows, Earth's Phantom Strike teams launched their counterattack. Sleek, black warships, smaller and faster than anything the Dominion had ever encountered, weaved between the massive Zenvari dreadnoughts, disabling engines, corrupting systems, disrupting formations. It was chaos. The Dominion's superior numbers meant nothing when their fleets were scattered, their communications jammed, their ships hacked in real time. Admiral Voss, watching from Lunar Command, leaned forward, studying the tactical map. Break their formation. Push them toward Sector 9. On his command, Earth's heavy cruisers emerged from the asteroid field, blocking the Dominion's escape route. The 7th Armada was trapped. And in the cold vacuum of space, where sound could not travel, the only thing the Dominion captains could hear was the sound of their own fear. They had walked into the abyss, and Earth had been waiting for them. The turning point. For centuries, the Dominion had ruled unchallenged. Now, their most powerful fleet was being dismantled, ship by ship, by the very species they had once mocked. Aboard the Dominion flagship Volthar, Admiral Xyros of the 7th Armada watched in horror as his fleet was torn apart. How are they doing this?" he whispered. A cold realization sank into his bones. This wasn't just a rebellion. It wasn't just humanity resisting. This was an extermination. They had underestimated Earth for the last time. Admiral Voss' final order. As the last Dominion battleship was crippled, Admiral Voss gave the final command. "Send them a message." The remaining Zenvari ships were allowed to escape, damaged, limping, humiliated. But before they left, Earth sent a final broadcast, a single image. The ruins of the 7th Armada, floating helplessly in the void. And below it, 3 words: "We are coming." The galaxy will never be the same. The surviving Zenvari ships fled back to their home system, carrying with them a terrible truth. Earth was no longer a subjugated species. Earth was no longer a power to be ignored. Earth had become a war machine. And now, for the first time in the history of the Zenvari Dominion, they were the ones afraid. The war had only just begun, and humanity had already won the first battle.